We're going to open the February 3rd Selectmen's meeting. We're going to go into executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, negotiation terms with non-union personnel, the fire and EMS chief. I made the motion, and so I'll say Key-Fi.
And then we're coming back.
No, and we'll be returning to open session thereafter to further conduct our business meeting.
Stone Eye.
Key-Fi.
Waisaki, aye.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks,
So we are returning from executive session. We had a short executive session. Meetings of the Board of Selectmen are generally recorded for transmission on Berlin Cable TV and YouTube. Your voice and image may be recorded. We've just had an executive session concerning our fire EMS chief position, and I'm going to ask the board to reaffirm their vote to rescind the offer to Jeffrey LeBlanc for our fire and EMS chief. Do I hear that motion?
So moved.
So seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It's unanimous. And I would also like to vote in open session to execute the contract with Ken Clark, which we have just agreed to. Do I have that motion? Do you hear that motion?
So moved.
So seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So, want to congratulate Ken. We're happy to have you. We're very happy to have you. We're lucky to have you.
Yes. Pictures tomorrow.
Pictures tomorrow.
Pictures tomorrow.
So if the board and chief would like to sign the signature page, there are two originals right there.
Okay. Let me find my pen. Here.
Oh,
Margaret to the O. Why is Margaret to an O?
Mary.
Yes.
You get a right from it? Yeah, that one.
For those of us that don't know what happened with the old chief and the chief,
Would you like to?
I made a recommendation to the board that
There you go.
the board rescind its offer. Yeah, it,
He was not negotiating in good faith.
correct.
Okay. All right.
We're all signed?
I believe we are.
Thank you.
again. And,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris, thank you.
thank
Lisa,
you.
thank you. Have a good morning.
Thank you,
See you in
chief.
the morning.
I'll see you in the morning.
Mary, thank you.
Okay, no problem, Chief. Safe ride home.
Thank you.
Just
Alrighty.
Okay, yeah, thanks.
Robert wants to use that, so it
Okay.
captures all the edits correctly.
Okay.
That's, wait, to take that with
Is
you,
there
or you can
anything
keep it with
different?
notes on it?
No.
Margaret,
Yes.
where is it different?
Well, as we go down, we added a letter of support on the Mass Film incentives.
Which doesn't exist yet.
Okay.
I have the agenda right here.
It's the one on
See it.
my town
Yeah,
government. Okay,
correct.
well, that's pretty much what I have right here. I just
Okay.
changed it
And
myself.
and we do
yeah.
have members of the EDC here who can, or Peter could speak to that, I suppose,
Okay.
the film thing.
Yeah. Let's see, what time is our first appointment with the Council on Aging? Was at 7. So we need to talk with the Council on Aging first about the draft COA director job description. Bob?
Thank you.
How are you this evening?
Well, thank you. How are you?
Good.
This was just slightly tweaked over the original. Doesn't add much, if anything. Works closely with the COA, so we changed that to works closely with and supported by the COA. Indicated that in addition to attending monthly COA meetings, they might also be required to attend the occasional evening meeting. Minor change in some wording on providing referrals for senior citizens. And dealing with Powder House News, preparing that, making sure that it gets out. Added on serving as staff liaison to the Council on Aging, at the end prepares an annual summary of COA activities for inclusion in the annual town report due in January of each year. And on the last page, ability to represent the COA at the annual town meeting by answering questions relevant to the COA. And computer literacy, but specifically knowledge of My Senior software would be a plus. So no radical changes, just some tweaking.
Through the chair, so I've attended the COA meetings as they've gone through this job description, and the sense I got, and Bob, correct me if I'm wrong, the sense I got is that the changes they're making here really do represent the position as more a managerial position rather than as a clerical position in support of the COA. So I think the changes that the Council on Aging recommends be made reflects the understanding that this is more a true director position.
Okay. Any questions?
It's interesting, you asked me when I was appointed if I can work with the COA director, and right now I'd have to say no, because we don't have one.
Have you had any luck talking to Northborough or Boylston about?
I did talk with Boylston. The problem with Boylston, not Northborough, but I have talked with Boylston. The problem with Boylston is that they are looking for someone who is more than half-time. So between the hours that we need here
Put
and
them over.
it would put them way over.
Yeah. All right. Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
And seconded.
Okay.
Okay.
That was easy.
Well, excuse me,
Uh-oh.
through the chair, while Bob is here, would you like me to just touch on the COA van
Sure.
Oh, yes,
issue? I
please.
mean, it's part of my TA report, and I know Bob has been involved in these communications, but I just wanted to give a brief update. First of all, on the current COA van, the condition continues to deteriorate. It's now in for brakes. It did have, last week alone, it had a seatbelt issue where the seatbelt wouldn't release on one of the passengers, and so the seatbelt had to be cut, and now it's in for a full brake job. Now, I have spoken with WRTA's Executive Director, Dennis Lipka. He expects procurement approval this month, but the standard size 9 to 11 van that's included in the procurement is not a van that's within the state budget appropriation that's been committed to Berlin. It's about $15,000 more than the state budget appropriation that was voted by the legislature. So, my request at this point is that the town consider whether to use local funds, particularly the Highland Common Senior Needs and Housing Fund that actually funded the last COA van, to supplement the $60,000 in state funding. We have to determine, the Council on Aging has already begun to discuss the size of the van that would be optimal. Meanwhile, through all of this, we're still looking into the feasibility of entering into an agreement with WRTA. Dennis made it clear on the phone with me that if we are looking at a van of a different type and size of the one they include in their procurement, this is kind of foreign to WRTA, and they probably wouldn't be inclined to have an agreement through them as far as maintenance and things like that. So there would be, I think, a few challenges with doing that. So I sent him another email today asking the question that if town meeting did appropriate supplemental funding, whether we could still participate in their procurement and how would that work? So I'm waiting to hear back from him now.
So the Council on Aging are they discussing size van, the needs?
Actually, I think it would be very helpful if we could get an eye on some of the options that are there. I mean, you know, our position is we don't want them to issue us an Austin Mini that'll hold 2 people, but we're
Right.
not looking for a Cena Cruiser either. So present van holds...
I think it holds 11, doesn't it?
Or is it bigger than that?
I think it
9 to
holds at least
12.
11. It could be 13.
And it has a position in the back for a wheelchair to be
Yes.
locked in.
Yeah, that's going to be another issue with cost, is making sure that the van has the ramp.
Right.
I mean, Dennis was talking to me about a basic van, and I thought, well, that's really not practical for transporting our seniors, so.
And we don't want to sound soft about it, but some of the people have said the seats in this van are just a touch stiff,
Well,
hard to ride on.
Maybe flat?
So their standard idea of a COA van would not have a lift?
no, I think it would have a lift. Just in this bulk procurement, I think that we would be able to get it for about $75,000. So I told him that our
Okay.
town meeting is May 4th. Is it even feasible? How would we arrange that with them? So,
And do you have a handle on the needs of Berlin yet? Have you put feelers out there to find out how many riders, and, I mean, do we need 11-passenger van, or?
Right now, I guess there are 5 regular riders. My hope would be that the van use would expand, and that we might expand it to take groups of seniors to Fruitlands, to the concerts at Mechanics Hall that are free at lunchtime, and so on and so forth.
Okay.
So I think there are many other uses that can be made
Uses
of
if
the
you
van.
have the seating.
Right,
Yeah,
and also the personnel, because right now we have 1 driver.
yeah,
right.
yeah. So we're looking at that, and I can see other, maybe other potential uses for it down the road as well. I mean, even if it was for, even if it expanded to commuters who want to be, it's a 10-passenger with space for 2 wheelchairs. Thank you. Even to expand the use beyond that, maybe to bring, like I said, commuters to, to a T station in the morning, do some sort of carpooling or something like that. So we do have to think long-term. Right now, we're not getting that much in ridership, but we do only have 1 van driver, and we have a very, very limited operating schedule.
Yeah.
So,
And then there's
Okay.
the territorial issue also about WRTA's van. If they provided it and the driver and the scheduling, it could only go within their zone, which is
Yeah.
Worcester County, apparently.
yeah. And it may
So-
have to be negotiated with the Metro West or Middlesex or whatever, yeah.
All right, well, we'll wait more
You
information.
never want to see its taillights disappearing over the border into those other places. They can-
Well, I mean, it would be nice too to be able to, go to other events, because I see
Sure.
Hudson, Clinton, Northborough doing all sorts of things for their seniors, and it would be nice to, pop ours in the van and ship them over the border honest to God, or just,
Right,
additional.
foreign territories,
The foreign territories of another town.
exactly.
All right,
Thank you.
well, thank you very much.
Thanks for your good work, we appreciate it.
Thank you, Bob.
Pleasure.
You've really stepped up. Thank you.
Okay, I think we had a motion on the table and a second for the job description.
Yes.
So, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Alrighty, so I believe we have some minutes. Is it just the January 27th? Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
And seconded.
Did you all have any changes, or?
There is one actually dropped in the folder that you took under advisement, the capital planning committee's recommendations and the town administrator's recommendations on capital, but didn't actually vote them.
Yeah.
So I
Okay.
switched that out this afternoon.
Okay, I didn't catch that one. But up in the top, I believe it was Michael Ginsberg that was here, not Richard Smith.
Okay.
That's correct.
And when, I think it says we voted to approve, but I know that they were all unanimous, correct? I mean, the votes that we took that evening were all unanimous.
I believe so.
And then maybe in a next time, just an adjournment time, whenever we adjourned. Those are just suggestions. So, got a motion on the table and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. General public comment.
Captive audience in the back.
Yeah.
Well, you've got a good crowd here tonight,
Mm-hmm.
but a quiet one.
Just the one thing I would, on the van, with the new Rockwell Apartments, if, you know, we long-term do not know how many more people might be riding the van.
Right, that's true.
So, I mean, we definitely need to make sure we allow for some
Additional
serious expansion.
people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, yeah, there's not just that either. There's the Highland Street one and
Yep.
That's true.
the
yeah,
potential for another one, so, yeah.
right. All right,
They might all be wanting to ride the select board meetings.
yeah.
Bring
Monday
snacks,
evenings.
you're gladly welcome.
All righty. Would you like to give your town administrator report, Margaret?
Sure, the other pieces. Okay, we'll touch on speaking of Riverbridge, the Riverbridge Development Agreement and Modifications. So we had a working group of local stakeholders that met a couple of times to review the agreement and the modifications. And the discussions resulted in a consensus to have a new independent fiscal impact study done. This would be paid for by Riverbridge, and apparently they have paid for prior ones, but it would be done on behalf of the town, starting early spring, starting almost immediately once we refine the scope of work. The components in this particular case would include, first and foremost, impacts to public safety, in particular ambulance, because the agreement does actually indicate that Riverbridge would have essentially a privatized ambulance service, and the reality is that that is not feasible. The second one would be traffic mitigation. Bridge evaluation would be part of that, as would intersections that are addressed in the agreement that need to be upgraded. The third and fourth components would be other public service impacts, so impacts to demands, Council on Aging, for example, recreation, town clerk, dog licensing, voter registration, impacts on our finance departments, assessments, motor vehicle excise, and things like that. And then finally, education impacts. So what would increased, what are the projected increased enrollments, and how would that impact the town? So there are four major components for this study. The community center at Riverbridge is scheduled to open this month. I believe that's still on track. And then the first apartment building occupancy would be sometime between late March and early April. I've already talked about the Council on Aging van. Ambulance billing. Board designee Peg Stone, Chief Clark, June, Poland, the accountant, and I have been talking about recommendations to the board on ambulance billing procedures and the process for ambulance billing. The goal is to make the process efficient in such a way that it can be followed start to finish, and we optimize revenues moving forward. And then there are some very old outstanding receivables that are going to have to come to the board with recommendations for write-offs. The next is, let me Next thing, municipal vulnerability preparedness plan. So there is going to be an MVP kickoff meeting with what we're calling a key team. So it'd be police chief, fire chief, building commissioner, and some other Board of Health potentially. That's going to be held on February 17th. That's a kickoff meeting to discuss the MVP planning process. And after that initial key team kickoff, Mary's going to attend as well. After that meeting, we're going to be starting to gear up for broader community discussions, like a forum on municipal vulnerability preparedness, so to get all ideas from the entire community. Next, we have under regionalization, shared services and equipment. Board designee Lisa Wysocki and I met with the West Boylston Town Administrator and their select board designee Chris, and I cannot remember his last name, about kind of an initial discussion about the possibility of sharing a facilities director. So we met on January 30th. We generally discussed potential duties, work schedule, challenges and opportunities with having a shared position. We talked about some of the duties being energy systems oversight, project management, procurement assistance, building needs and condition assessments, repairs and upgrades, being liaison to a buildings committee, and a point person for the capital planning committee. We talked about the number of buildings we have. Berlin actually has about 17 buildings, ranging in size from large and heavily used to very small and rarely used. But in all cases, we own the buildings, we insure the buildings, and we need to find a way to keep the buildings from deteriorating. So we talked about things kind of in a larger context, and we are going to have a follow-up meeting later this month. I think it's either February 20th or 25th. And we are going to be talking to a couple of facilities directors just about the duties they have in their own positions, not to try to steal anybody or make any moves like that, but to talk about what they do in their positions. A shared facilities director would be a combined full-time position, but working approximately 16 hours a week for each town. So that's essentially what we've discussed to date, and I'll keep the board posted as we move forward to the next meeting. And then finally, I attended the Mass Municipal Association's annual conference in Boston from the 23rd to the 25th of July. I attended workshops on developments and initiatives in municipal finance. That included some updates from the Division of Local Services on the latest state revenues, new financial tools that they're releasing, videos on finances. I attended one on municipal law updates where they talked a little bit about recreational marijuana, legal changes, and regulatory changes to PEG, public educational, governmental, and cable fees. There are going to be some regulatory changes that will impact us. So it's probably a topic for discussion at an upcoming Cable Access Committee meeting. I attended the Maya annual business meeting where we found out what our overall health insurance rate increases would be in the coming year. We're looking at approximately a 4% increase in health insurance rates, maybe a little less. I attended a couple of personnel workshops on employee evaluations and making sure that we capture some key components, and our evaluation form looks pretty good. We've hit some of those items. And the last one I attended was on welcoming new employees and town officials, and that was all about onboarding and the information that we should share to get their buy-in. So that's it for updates at the moment. My full report can be viewed online.
And I apologize. We have under correspondence a letter of support on the Mass Film incentives. Did you want to speak to that, Peter?
Sure. So the Commonwealth has one of the best film incentives in the Union, and it sunsets in 2022. Those proponents that want to keep it are pushing to get all the support they can so it doesn't sunset and the sunset provision gets removed. So I've asked the board to generate a letter and contact our state rep, Naughton, and Senator Tran manually, not just a letter, and promote that. Indeed, that sunset provision is removed from the current legislation, and again, that's in 2022. But they're planning ahead, and when I went to the studios in Devon's, they were very, very, very booked. And I said, why don't you build another? And they said we would, but we don't know what the status of the sunset provision is. So I think if that happens, right in our backyard, that'll improve revenue for the community and increase our film activity, not Berlin, but Commonwealth's. So I think it's in our best interest, both in the Commonwealth's best interest and the town of Berlin's best interest to support this legislation. And you've got my email and the relevant attachments.
All right. Margaret, do you have anything to add?
I don't, but I do support, I don't have anything to add to what Peter has said, but I do support the board sending in a letter of support to retain these incentives for filming. Plus, it brings a level of excitement to local communities when the crews come in and film. It's an attraction.
All right, do I hear a motion to support the letter?
So moved.
And seconded.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Thanks, Peter. All right, and it's 7:30, and I do not see any.
This is on, this is regarding a flat penny DBA
Yes.
on the track. So it wasn't a requirement that the business attend, but I do want to report on the status. So about a little over a month ago, we contacted the Flat Penny to request that they file the DBA name change using the ABCC form. The response was really slow. I actually had a couple of follow-ups with the attorney asking to get it into us so we would have time to file it, review it, and get it to the board for approval tonight. I did have someone come in on Friday morning, but with incorrect payment, so I sent the forms and the payment back with that individual, and I asked him to return. I was here until 6:30 Friday night, and I didn't see him come back. So at this point, I would actually ask, what I would recommend is that the board set a date for an enforcement hearing 3 weeks from now. This would give me time to follow up with the attorney again. We could wait a few days to post this. I could follow up with the attorney and see if we can get the paperwork expedited back here so that we could. Okay. Okay. So it is a little over a month ago. It looks like December 31st. So I would like to give them an opportunity to get the paperwork in before we actually go ahead and do the notice for the hearing. But my recommendation is that if we don't get a response from them in a couple of days, that we actually go ahead and post the hearing, because I honestly, at this point, do not know how else to get a response from them. And so that's my recommendation, and I will follow up with Attorney Mears again tomorrow morning and say, get us the paperwork, give us a week, we'll review it, and then we can bring it back here for the board's approval next meeting.
Okay.
Okay?
Do I hear a motion to support Margaret's recommendation?
So moved.
And seconded.
Okay.
What is the issue?
The issue,
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
okay, all right, so through the chair. With a name change on an alcohol license, there does have to be it's called the Doing Business As form. It's a form provided by the ABCC that simply requires the proponent, or the license holder, to file that with us locally with a fee, and it simply requires the board's approval. I've had trouble getting that form and the payment in here in a timely manner. So what I'm trying to do now is just encourage them to come in with it. We'll take care of it. We do have to report it to the ABCC, The filing is not required with them, but we do have to report the name change to ABCC. So we're just trying to get this taken care of. Okay?
I was just asking the question before you voted, because that's during the question period. That's why I asked that.
Oh. Okey-doke. All right.
So I have a question before we continue.
Sure.
So for the public, this was handed to me by Pete, applicant for proponent brief description form. This is all I got, so I wonder if we can open it to Peter to talk about it and bring it up to the board?
I
Or do
would,
you
I
wanna
would
wait?
actually, yeah, I would actually recommend that way we could put it on as an agenda item for the next meeting, if it's going to require board discussion.
Don't know. It's just a blank form that was handed to me. I have no detail beyond this.
Yeah.
Margaret, why don't I just give them, fill them in, and then you can have an agenda it for whenever.
Will the chair enter? You can entertain that.
I'm
if you'd
sorry?
like.
Entertain.
You could,
Yeah, what this is
if you would
about.
like to entertain that, that's your prerogative.
Do we want, I don't know what this form is.
Well, and that's just
It's,
it.
through the chair, it's a request that any inquiries about projects in town, when they're received by the reviewing body, that those inquiries be circulated to all public bodies, right?
Yeah, so the backstory is I got an inquiry from Solomon Pond saying, what's this application, a butter, blah, 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 which we'll hear about in a minute. And I felt blindsided. I didn't know what he was talking about. So I said to myself, that doesn't seem right. EDC chairman or any other leadership should know what's going on in town, and I felt uncomfortable. So I said, why don't we create, I said to myself and then said to Margaret, why don't we create a form, so you can be a chaplain. Why don't we create a form, and if the board's inclined to agree with this, that's the form you're holding in your hand.
Okay.
Margaret's gotten
I
one
got one,
already.
yep.
Why don't we create a
I got
form
this tonight, too.
that requests an applicant for whatever, not a building permit, but for some commercial purpose or some larger purpose, to fill in any interested leadership as to what's going on. You can see the questions are few. And then Margaret or Mary or town clerk would distribute this to all boards and committees, so we know there's a pending application, there's a pending concern, a pending permit, and we won't be blindsided. And then any board or committee can inquire further of the relevant applicant. So if you're inclined to agree with it, we can talk about it, as Margaret said, once I've refined that's just a quick draft. We can talk about this, at another meeting if you're inclined to agree with the concept.
Okay.
And they would an applicant would fill that out as part of their paperwork, and Mary or town clerk or someone would just distribute it, and then everybody's on the same page.
Would this be helpful? Do you feel as though this would be
I
helpful?
think we
I'd like
need
to
to wait
look
to
at it.
discuss it, because
Yeah.
Margaret just got it and we
Right.
just got it.
Yeah,
I
I-
think there should be discussion tonight.
I think.
Oh, I was going to re-agenda it. Yes.
Yeah, so take it under advisement, and
Okay.
we can look it over.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Is our 7:35 appointment here?
They were here. They might have stepped back out.
Probably in the hallway.
The three of them were here.
Okay.
You want them?
Yes, please.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. B.
Hi. How are you?
Could we bring some chairs up?
Oh, please.
Sure. Please. Come on. Oh, come up. Come on.
And make sure you speak loudly for the camera, since your back is to them.
Isn't that the mic there?
That's the mic.
Yeah, but
Oh.
still,
No, it's not a.
yeah. Some people in the back may not be able to hear you.
So, good evening. I'm Steve Benincasa. This is John Grenner, the engineer. This is my daughter Julie Benincasa here with me also.
All right.
So we're here just to give your board some information. We have an application that is going to be coming up in front of the zoning board in the middle of the month. It's for the 180 River Road West property, which is the old Worcester Sand and Gravel property. We went to the building inspector, and as prior to our application with the zoning board, and what we presented him was for a residential care facility for 65 units that will have a community building. We will be offering services, medical services, through a partnership with Bayada Health, who they can provide a wide range of services, whether it's rehabilitation, some medical needs, all the way up to they can do, what is it, when,
Dementia?
no. I think I might need it right now. Or hospice, all the way up
Hospice,
through
okay.
hospice services.
That's the end.
So what the building inspector, he looked at our application, and what he determined was, in the limited business zone, you do have by right for residential care facilities. They also have a classification under, I believe it's section 314, which is classification by implication, which and that's in a letter that came from the zoning, from the building inspector. That's part of our application package with the zoning board. And what that section 314 says is that if your use is not specifically allowed or not allowed, but it is in the same vein as what's allowed in that zoning district, then it qualifies as a special permit. So that was his determination. We agree with his determination because we are not what you would call a classic residential care facility. A lot of times residential care facilities, that's more of a nursing home, really more on-site staff 24 hours. This is more in the vein of a continuing care retirement community where it's more independent living, but you're moving in knowing that I do have some needs, but I don't need full 24-hour care. So we're going to have, I said, 65 units. There will be a community building,
Wellness center.
a wellness center that will have a on-site, next door to that, there will be on-site staff who's going to be a person who's a responsible person who will be on call. If someone in the community does have a need, they will be notified. They have
Call buttons.
the call buttons. So there will be a notification. We will have someone on staff 24 hours. And then in the wellness center, we will have facilities for Bayada Health to bring people in to see them, to provide service. Again, whether it's rehab, they'll have a medical office in there so that they can provide services. And the services that they will provide will be individualized for whatever someone needs. Your needs might be different from my needs, so they can evaluate them and provide them with a program and provide services on site.
So the idea is to make this something more affordable, so it's not a nursing home per se, where the fees would be, you'd be surprised how high the fees are in a nursing home, but this is more like a la carte, like a menu, like I may move there and not need any services at all today, although it will be available to me 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and John might move in here and he might need a lot of care. So that would be available. I say he's 10 years younger than me, so I can throw that out there. But it'd probably be the opposite, but...
So, excuse me, through the chair, so this is like a progressive care facility, similar to like the Christopher House model and things like that?
I'm not sure
where you
what
have-
the...
Oh, okay, so that's I'm sorry, it's like a Worcester-based, it's around in several Worcester County towns, but similar to exactly to what you're saying. So independent seniors could move in and then as they grow older.
Age in
have-
place.
Yeah, aging in place, so as.
And that's the model that we're looking at, age in place. So you might not need to have 24-hour care now, but you might need some care. So as you progress and, you want people to be able to stay in their homes, and we want them to feel like this is their home. They don't have to, I need more services, I have to go to another facility, and then what do you do with your house? So we want this to be something where people can age in place and have a wide scope of services that they can draw from as they need it.
As
So
long
we
as they're able to
visited-
stay in their home.
Yeah, we visited
As long as-
a number of communities that are already existing, that are running like this, and there's a waiting list for these people, for these type of facilities. So there's a huge demand out there in the community that people are not ready for the nursing home, but they're not totally independent. And so this kind of fits the in-between. But yet, if you don't need any services at all initially, this would work also, because we're not imposing these fees on just everybody carte blanche. It's on as-needed basis.
Right. Well, where if I have my mother who, she can live by herself, but there's somebody there on staff who's in the community, so it gives you a level of comfort that you're not, if I'm not right around the corner,
They're not alone.
they're not alone. So there's a responsible staff, and that's the medical side of it. On the amenities side, they will have that same person who's in the responsible person. They're going to have,
The ability
Things-
to cook one meal a day. and
provide
also-
a meal.
And also to manage the development itself. So instead of like a typical development we do now, they typically outsource the whole management part of this. This will be done all in-house by the responsible person who will actually live on site, and he'll have facilities on site that he's gonna be next to this wellness center. So that is the business model that we're shooting for, and we've seen this done in a couple other communities, and it's highly successful, and there's a huge demand for this.
So we just wanted to bring it out to your board, get some feedback. As I said, we're going to be going in front of the zoning board, I believe, on the 15th. 12th? I keep on saying the 15th.
You do.
I don't know why. It's the middle of the month. So on the 12th, and we want to, again, bring you up to speed, maybe get some feedback, and be able to give that information as well to the zoning board.
Okay. Questions?
Start with Lisa first, because I have a page.
Really, I am so sick.
All right,
I'm barely hanging in there.
Okay.
So
all right.
have fun.
Thank you. So, questions. Will this facility be certified by the state?
It will not be certified by the state. Although Bayada, who is going to be an exclusive partner, obviously they're certified, and also they can provide all the medical service. So through them, they have a certification. Will this specifically be certified by the state, this as like a facility? No.
Is this private pay or Medicare, or both?
It could be any combination. It could be private, it could be insurance, it could be
V&A, it could be Mass Health, it could be Medicare, it could be a variety, it could be public, private. So there'll be a variety of funding, whatever works for the individual.
Is this a profit or non-profit, or not-for-profit?
profit.
There are similar spots in Northborough, Worcester, around the area. What makes this facility different than those?
This will allow people to feel like they're in their own home. You're not in a room in a building, So
It's gonna feel more like a home.
It's gonna feel more like a home, where these are more townhouse-style structures, so.
More like an individual home versus an apartment. So
Right.
most of the others you see are part of a bigger building that would be, we call that garden style, which is everybody's on a different floor and everyone has their own. So you walk down a hallway to go to your apartment, and that's more of a nursing home type environment, and that's not what we're shooting for here.
You had come to us a few months back talking about a cannabis facility in the same spot. So if you have this facility and potentially a cannabis facility, whether it's retail or whether it's a grower, what are the concerns?
Well, there have been so many issues in the cannabis world where the regulations are changing, whether you can provide product over state lines. Before you couldn't, now it's looking like you can. So then there's a big shakeup, and a lot of people who are involved in that industry everybody's freezing because they don't know which way that whole business is going to be going. So
So we've talked to a number of different people that were in that industry, and we've been unsuccessful to actually nail someone down who is actually going to fund it and going to operate it. You know, I mean, if we have a few candidates that were fine with it as long as we were going to come up with $20 million, but I don't have $20 million, and I'm not in the cannabis. John does it. He won't part with it.
I need a GoFundMe.
So no one was willing to fund an operation of that size right now. So, I mean, meanwhile, we're waiting, you know, and we tried to work with a number of different companies, and we just couldn't get past that
Yeah.
point.
And some of them were growers who they said, well, if they make interstate commerce available, you could have someone in Kansas with, you know, thousands of acres. Why are we going to do an inside facility, you know? So it just seemed like there's just too much, too many unknowns.
It's an expensive area of the country to try to do a grow facility when you can do one, like you say, in Kansas for a fraction of the cost. So I think, you know, the people in the business are not sure exactly which way the wind's blowing, and when there's uncertainty, people will not invest.
Okay. So what about taxes? I mean, we kind of sort of knew, you know, if you were bringing in a facility, what the town may be getting in taxes and revenue from that facility, or what additional money you might be paying for services in town. So if you're bringing this type of business in, where's the tax benefit to the town for allowing this
Well,
to come in?
it's not, if it was a nonprofit, there'd be no taxes. So this is not a nonprofit. So it will be taxed ordinarily.
So whatever the
value is
the
times the
value of
tax
the
rate?
property is, it's going to have, you know, 65 units plus the community. So whatever the valuation is from the assessor, we'd be taxed based on that.
Okay. So speaking of impact to town and emergency equipment, so what do you anticipate as an impact for additional EMS, additional ambulances, additional police that may need to go up there and provide support? So how does that coincide with the budget and additional personnel that we may need to bring onto the town with the cost to the town?
These people are not without resources, so most of these people have insurance, so if there was an ambulance call, that would be paid through the insurance company. So it's not a, it's not the client that would be,
It's not the town that would be paying footing the bill, where they're without insurance, and then it's just another. Would there be some additional calls for EMS? Absolutely. Would they be, you know, on a consistent basis? No. I was talking to the
fire chief.
the fire chief before, and a lot of times they'll maybe send a police car out to say, okay, what's going on? We're going to have someone on staff who will be there to evaluate if someone needs help, if they need a 911. Maybe someone just, fell out of bed and they're fine. So we would have someone on staff who's evaluating, maybe they don't need a 911 call. But will there be? Absolutely. Will it be a burden on the town? I don't believe so. And if there is a fee, these people will have insurance, so they would be paying for their ambulatory ride.
And actually, thanks for the segue into my next question, where you had talked about, we didn't plan this, I swear. Look, I wrote the note down before he started talking. Look, it's like right there. So you had talked about somebody being on site. Is this an EMT person? Is it a first responder? Is it just, hey, Chris is there, Lisa falls out of bed, Chris calls? I mean, so what is the level of care for that person who's going to be there 24 hours?
It would be someone who, they're not going to be performing a tracheotomy on somebody
Right.
while someone's, waiting for the ambulance to come, but they would be someone who does have some type of medical training, whether it's,
Certification.
some type of certifications. It would be someone who's capable of performing the job.
Okay. And then you had talked about shared meals and stuff, so I'm assuming that the Board of Health would come into play with
Yeah.
food on site. Have you talked to them yet?
I did. I spoke to the Board of Health, and these units will have their own kitchens. This would be kind of an accessory type of use. We're not going to be having a full-blown, restaurant kitchen. We would provide one meal a day. A lot of that might be simple things to make. We're not going to have a full-blown restaurant. And again, a lot of the purpose of that is to try to keep the fees down. We don't want this to be someone's going to the Ritz for the weekend and paying top dollar. We want to provide a good service, a quality service, but it's not going to knock their socks off with fees. So back to the Board of Health, he looked at that as being kind of an accessory type of use, whether using the restroom at the wellness center or in my unit, it's the same thing. If I'm going to cook myself a meal, or I might go over there for breakfast, it's just an accessory type structure. It's not a full-blown restaurant.
Okay. And final question, you had talked about that there's a great demand for this, for
Yes.
these services. Why Berlin?
Why Berlin?
Yeah, why are you going to put it here?
Property.
Because the
Well-
pro-
Because it's a great
property.
community.
because the property's available. What's that, John?
I said it's a great community.
There you
She
go.
didn't
Right
set me up
answer.
with that either, by the way.
It was a test. You got it, you got it.
Berlin's not the only community that these are being built in. These are already existing in other communities, and this is the baby boomers are here. And
Well, and that's a
They've been
question.
working to find an appropriate use for this property for over a year.
a year and a half now.
Yeah.
And we did run this concept by the planning board about 4 months ago or so, and they said that they thought it was appropriate. So we went back and we did a lot of research on this and work and found out different agencies, and we've looked at other communities, and now we feel like we're ready to go ahead with the permit process.
Well, that's kind of a question too about long-term. I mean, I'm one of the last of the baby boomer generations where I might be like, yeah, sweet, yeah, I'll move into a place like this. But when you start talking about Generation X and whoever all the generations are behind, what are your long-term plans? I mean, because it might work for people of my generation, but kids who are 20, 30 years younger are like, yeah, nope. So.
Well, we're not gearing it for them now, but when their term comes, they'll think like we do. Just like,
Yeah.
just like, when I bought my first house, I was adamant that I did not want to live in a subdivision.
Yeah.
And so I built my house on 5 acres of land out in the country. And then I got married and had a couple children, and my wife said, we need to move into a subdivision. And all of a sudden, the thing that I never wanted to do was now appropriate for me and my family. And for 20 years, we lived in a subdivision. Now I live in an over 55. someday when I'm, I look at these things now, some of these not assisted living, some of these facilities now, and I say, I'm not ready for it. Well, yeah, my arms and legs, everything works really good right now. But if I start having some issues, physically or mentally, these type of facilities are going to look very attractive.
So what are you looking at for age?
Well, 62 is the initial move-in target. And typically, developments, they move in, they're on the younger side, and then they age in place is the whole idea. So that we look at people could live in here from 62 to probably 90, 95, and then they might need 4 or 5 or 6 or 8 years in a nursing home for their final days, maybe.
Yep.
Maybe they'll, all people are different. My grandfather, luckily he lived alone in his home till he passed. But I don't know if that's the typical. You have to be pretty healthy to do that.
I toured a facility in Northborough, and I asked the same question: what are the ranges of ages? And they had a memory care, more of a medical wing to it, and they said they had a range of, it was like 56 up until over 100. And I said, who came in at 56? I'm 51. And it was someone who had a little early onset dementia, and they needed the services. So they needed the services, they moved in. And I met a woman, she was 101 and a half. And she was sharp as a tack. And she couldn't have been more than this tall.
Shrinking.
She was slowly shrinking. Sharp as a tack, but she needed some, she wasn't going to be making her own meals, and she needed some. So you get a wide spectrum of people with different needs, and people hate to leave their home.
It's more about what they need than their age specific.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's if they have the need, then it's appropriate.
So what about an age requirement? Let's say that I'm 65 and my child needs to stay with me because of his or her developmental issues. So
Well, we
where there's
do have-
one, there's two.
We've had that.
Is that allowed?
We've had that with some of our, I've built a number of over 55 communities, and we've actually had that in some of our over 55 communities where you have to be 55 and older. And if my daughter Julie wants to move in here, she's 33 years old, and she has a little baby too, which would really upset the
The dynamics.
the
yeah.
dynamics.
Be all up in arms.
He'd be up, they'd be all up in the middle of the night.
But we had this one family that moved in and had a daughter that was, I think she was about 19, 20 years old, and she had a disability. So at that time, I had finished the development, the condo associate was managing it, and they were really adamant about, someone that wanted to have 2 dogs and about this, but they never said anything because, and I looked at it and said, what would be more heartless than for someone to look at that family and a daughter with a disability and said, you can't live here with your parents? I mean, so it's a type of thing, if they have the disability. I think the law provides for that, but they also, just, someone's only decency to allow that is appropriate.
All right.
I'm done.
Good job.
The
Yeah.
whole page.
The
Yeah.
whole, hey, I wanted to do my homework because
You
I don't
did.
know, I don't know who else in the town may have questions. I've seen it a couple times on the town Facebook page, the hearing. So
Yeah.
I know that people are starting to think about it, and, whether they're here or whether they're watching, I wanted them to hear some of the questions that they may pose.
We appreciate those
To
questions
you.
also.
No, and we want everybody to feel comfortable, and we've sent notifications out to all the abutters, and I have fielded a couple of phone calls, and we're setting up some meetings with some people who are abutters, so we want everybody to feel comfortable.
And there's a learning process for us too. This is our first CCRC, although, if I go back 20 years ago, I never built an over 55, and there's a little learning curve with everything. So we like to look and see what other people have done. That's the first part. And then we also get the feedback from the community and from yourselves, and there's things that we may want to tweak along the process that we don't think of everything, although by looking at other business models, and we've talked to some of these other agencies and developments, and we've had a number of meetings with them, and we think that we're targeting a pretty large market, and we're actually going to be proposing one of these in another town that why Berlin? Well, Berlin's first for us. We have a couple other towns that we have our sights on, because we see this as a huge demand. There's a huge demand. It's a huge need for this.
Do you see this progressing into some other sort of where people need round-the-clock care?
Well, in a perfect business model, we'd have an assisted living right next door.
Yeah,
So one would feed into the other.
right.
And the people would feel comfortable living in this development, knowing that, people hate to change. And the older they get, the more they hate to change.
Yeah.
So if you could tell them that they don't have to leave the general area, that they can move right over there,
Right,
that's a very comforting thought, so.
yeah,
Or if there are couples who, maybe the husband is starting to fail and he needs, you hate to break up a couple. If you say, Joe's gonna be moving right next door, so he gets more 24-hour,
Right.
nursing and medical care. They're down the street. They're not, a half an hour away.
right.
Yeah, things don't happen like The Notebook. They don't happen that evenly. I know, it's sad. So eventually, one of us will fade in one way or another, and the other one will have to hopefully stick by us.
What about cost? So how much would it be? Are you anticipating that, somebody goes to this place? Unlike a house, where you could say we're starting at X amount of thousands of dollars. What is the cost associated with this?
Well, we know that some of the facilities, they run between $4,000 and $12,000 a month. So it depends on if you need that full range, and then how much the insurance kicks in, and Medicare. There's so many different sources of funding for these, so it's not necessarily private. It's a combination of different fundings. Honestly, we're not expert in that area there, but we know it is available. We know it's being done. So we're trying to make this as affordable as we possibly can, and by building in the facilities so the agency can just come here, they'll have the space that'll be available for them to do aerobics or yoga or just a fitness class, or come in here just for a checkup, to have a VNA service to come in and do checkups for these people. So it would be the most cost-effective way that you could do it.
All right, well, I want to thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very informative.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for
Thank
the
you very
Spanish
much.
Inquisition.
My pleasure. Is there any questions from the audience, or are they all set?
Do you want to open it up?
Would you, no? All right, Peter?
How much revenue do you expect, tax revenue do you expect it will contribute to the community? And when do you think that tax revenue will kick in, if things go to plan?
I would say roughly about a year from now. And, when the buildings are first built and there's an occupancy permit and the people living there, and that would, again, we kind of answered that question here with the board. The values, it would be privately owned, so they would be taxed and not tax exempt.
What do you project that revenue will be, the total revenue once built?
We haven't done that right now.
Okay.
What was the other, I forgot what the other, these are little smaller units, so that they wouldn't be as higher priced. So they wouldn't generate the same revenue as the over 55 that we had planned earlier. It'd be lower than that, but still, still positive for the town.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't have that number.
Okay, thanks.
You did just say 4,000, 6,000 a month. Are these apartments, or are these sold as condos, or what?
That could be fees associated for...
Medical services.
For medical service, through the health agency.
So that's on top of the ownership of the unit?
Yes.
Yeah.
So why can't you, so you have no absolutely idea what your base model unit with no services would cost? I mean, it's a pretty easy question. I mean, the other ones were around $500,000. Are these
Right.
gonna be at $250,000 plus healthcare services on top of it? I mean, I don't, I know that you haven't done this before, so you're basically just throwing stuff at the wall to see what sticks. So you honestly can't tell us how much more ambulance we're gonna need. Because what you're talking about is exactly the same as Knollwood on the Worcester-West Boylston line. They have you can do a house, you can do an apartment, or you can be in the skilled nursing facility. So, I mean, you have to have some kind of base model price. I mean, the unit's a unit.
But I think they're just preliminary at this point. They're
Right.
not prepared to do a full dog and pony show.
Right.
Well, no, which I understand, but I mean, if you're gonna build, a 750 square foot little bungalow house, say, something, just like a 1-bedroom little cottage, and it, I mean, is it gonna run around 250? I mean, from doing construction, as long as you guys have, you know how much it costs per square foot to slap up a building. So, I mean, you have to have some guess as to what.
At some point, will you do some sort of community outreach or something where you could maybe take questions from the community rather than extending this evening?
Sure.
Okay.
Would it make sense to invite them to the coffee talk?
That's already jam-packed, at least this
But
one
we will
is
be having
jam-packed.
others.
Yes, but we'll be having more.
Coffee talk, what?
We do a sort of a quarterly coffee talk with the selectmen, say at either 19 Carter or 1870 Town Hall. And,
Just gives
have
the-
sometimes have guests that come in and speak to.
Yep, just gives the folks in
an
town an
interest.
opportunity to bring forth
I
what's
could sit
on
here and
their
throw
mind.
numbers out, but I think it's really too preliminary to be doing that, ma'am. Honestly.
So down
All
the
right.
road, maybe you can do
Yeah.
something where you can educate the community a little bit more rather than, like I said, continuing this evening.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
Awesome, thanks.
All right. We have old business, the draft annual town meeting warrant.
This is, through the chair, this is a very, very preliminary and incomplete markup. Tonight was your first night to actually start reviewing town meeting warrant articles. So not only are all articles submitted to date not included here, the ones from last year, we're still cleaning it up from last year.
I was going to
So-
say, once I got to a certain point, it's like,
Oh,
wait
yeah.
a minute,
Sorry.
I'm
That's
reading
right.
last year's.
And I made it in big, bold letters. The following articles have not yet been replaced or updated.
Yes.
So the only ones that we've really done so far, and Mary is actually going to be helping a lot with this because I unfortunately have limited time to work on it. But what I've done, and I think, not exactly sure the process the board follows to vote, I don't know if you vote to include articles as you go through, but last year, there was one town meeting warrant, and it included articles for the FY19 and then articles for FY20. So this is formatted that same way now. So it's assumed to be one annual town meeting that includes actions for the 2 fiscal years, FY20 and FY21. So the only thing so far here, and no votes are needed tonight, it's just a kind of a recap. The only articles included here as very preliminary drafts would be appropriation to fund any snow and salt expense deficits in the current year. We talked earlier tonight about the possibility of some local funding to supplement the state appropriation for Council on Aging van. That's something that the town would probably want to act on in the current year so that we could get moving on funding and getting the van this fiscal year. And then there are potentially going to be others that are needed for FY '20. Then moving on to FY '21, you've got your standard articles. The first would be choosing elected to fill vacancies in town offices. And then you've got your standard summary below that. Then you've got the reports of boards and committees. And then the following article last year is a standard article with authorization for the treasurer to borrow in anticipation of revenue. Then the following article, based on last year, would be revolving funds. This particular year, it would be the reauthorization of the revolving funds, except the dog licensing revolving fund would not be reauthorized because the town clerk has begun funding dog license expenses from the general fund. So that fund actually has, I believe, about $13,000 in it that's just accumulated. So it's not really a true revolving fund to begin with. So that would be closed out for funding from general fund. The next article, again, an annual article would be on the tree pest control for Dutch elm disease. And then an article on accepting any outstanding, this would actually be on 2019 town reports. The next article would be on budget. I think typically you do a very simple article in the warrant, and your motions are far more detailed and extensive to follow the budget document, right? You do, in your warrant, you do appropriate a sum of money to fund the FY '21 operating budget, so then your motions would be much more detailed, identifying funding sources. Then the next article would be Chapter 90, and I'm saying, I'm just, the articles aren't necessarily in the order that they'll be finally in, but just kind of following along from prior years. Chapter 90 funding, that's accepting the Chapter 90 bond monies that are issued each year. And then the following article is the funding from the Anna Hunt Trust Fund to the library account.
Isn't that the one, that's not the dog licensing?
No. That's library.
Book fines that go into a fund for the library.
These are-
Oh, no, you're right. I think it is tied to the dog licensing somehow.
The library?
The Anna Hunt Fund.
Anna Hunt Fund. I gotta, do you remember what the origin of that is? Like,
I thought it was, we weren't doing it anymore. The Anna Hunt Fund.
Okay, so this was on for
All right.
last year, and
so on and
it
so
certainly
forth?
could be pulled, yeah. The next is the Cable Access Committee, the authorization to expend monies from the Public Educational and Governmental Spending Account. I mentioned earlier that there are regulatory changes to this, and I am looking into seeing if that's going to change the form of the article. The next one is Highway Hot Top. All right, so the next one actually is, would be bundled with the capital and extraordinary expenditures that were recommended by the CPC. Highway Hot Top was one of them. Master Plan, actually, I don't know why I didn't pull this, because that has not been requested to date. Additional funding to update the...
We pretty much do that every year on a revolving basis.
Okay. So I haven't received that yet, but assuming it would come again. The next one, actually, the fire EMS pumper tanker, it's showing here, but the sunset clause from last year was, or 2 years ago it might have been, was June 30th, 2020. Was when the money had to be expended. That's going to have to be extended to June 30th, 2021, because we will not be receiving the apparatus or making final payment by June 30th of 2020.
Do we know when the pumper's truck is coming?
So as of the time that the contract was signed, I believe it was 285 days out. So we're looking more at closer to the end of this calendar year.
Okay.
Yeah. The next would be a self-contained breathing apparatus. Again, a recommendation for replacement by Community Preservation, Capital Planning Committee. And everything else is untouched so far. Just today, or was it yesterday? Just today, I received 9 additional proposed town meeting warrant articles, so those haven't been built in yet, nor have the placeholders that I had prepared previously and shown to the board. So these all have to be built into the warrant, and we have to start cleaning it up.
So,
Okay.
2 questions on
Sure.
this. You or somebody else, Margaret, indicated, will the Board of Selectmen be offering a vote like finance? You know, where finance will say, finance approves 4-0, will the selectmen be doing the same?
Yes.
Okay.
I did ask that question because in different towns it's different. Some select boards actually do make recommendations on the articles. Other boards just vote to include the articles on the warrant.
I think that's what we've been doing,
Okay.
actually.
And the second question, and I know that there'll be a groan on this, but when it comes to the budget, finance will stand up and say, lines 1 through 65, total cost is $8,004,612. Sometimes people walk away from the meeting and go, I really don't know what the $8,612 were. So is there an opportunity, even though I know it could extend the meeting, to really kind of like dig into it? Because again, my point that I've been harping on is that I think the town needs to know exactly what is being voted on and where the money is going and whether they have the opportunity to say yes or stand up and say no and ask questions.
Well, they do all have the opportunity to educate themselves as far as what the money's going for. And I think something that people don't understand is that they can pull an article out and say, I make a motion that we discuss this separately or something.
I mean, and it kind of goes back to a point that Lisa had made a couple weeks ago, that, yeah, some of the ownership is on the folks in the town, but to understand what they're voting on. But there's also an ownership on us to be able to present this information to the town so that they understand exactly what they're voting on. So I hesitate that, you give a lump sum of lines, and then you give a lump sum of dollars, and you're really not kind of quite sure what this means in this block.
I think there's time beforehand to go ask those questions. Finance is available. They meet almost every week before this. There is a thing where they go over the articles. We talk about this for weeks. I think there is a limit to what you can and should do given our time constraints.
So I am going to be participating in, I don't know what we'd call them. We could make up a name for them. So the Finance Committee has held, whether they're called budget forums or pre-town meetings or what have you. So I'm going to be participating in that this year, as is the administrative finance team. So we're going to be able to provide some additional backup on each of the lines. The other thing is that at town meeting, I believe, town meeting sees the line item budget, so they see all the lines. Now, this could be an opportunity. It would be a discussion with the moderator to see if he wants to actually say to town meeting, this is the budget section we are now, addressing. I'm going to go down each of the lines. If there's a hold on anything, I'll ask you to hold. We can discuss those lines that you want held. So it gives an opportunity. I've had this in another one of my prior communities. It gives an opportunity for people to actually ask to hold and further discuss certain lines within this bundle. So, and it's usually, it's usually 1 or 2, and sometimes it's none. But it would provide that additional opportunity for discussion on various lines. So,
Okay.
that's the moderator's jurisdiction.
Don't some communities, or I believe that some communities list the cost per household, per average household? So line item 10 is, 800,000.
I've brought it up multiple times, Peter, to ask that I think,
that would be under finance's
Yeah.
jurisdiction,
Finance
whether
or
you
the-
decide to do that or
Well,
not.
or the assessor slash tax
You're the ones
collector.
that create the annual town report, you're the ones that are the final say-so. You could ask them to add that column,
I've asked multiple times.
or you
'Cause-
could vote to instruct.
Right.
Okay. Go on,
Yeah.
Margaret.
I don't know where we left off, I'm sorry. As far as the question, I think that there is a way that we could potentially provide a tax calculator that might help, determine how much, what the cost on residents for any particular service is. Our situation is definitely complicated by the split tax rate. Definitely complicated by the split tax rate. Very difficult to calculate the impact on residents versus commercial. So it's not an easy split. So that's something that we'd have to look into, and we can check with the Department of Revenue to see if they might be able to assist us putting some sort of calculator together.
Okay,
And
so you don't need us to vote on this evening?
no, this is strictly review, and it's very preliminary. I'm going to be, Mary and I are going to be working together through the remainder of this week about, to deal with strategy moving forward and really kind of seeing if we can finalize certain groups of warrant articles so that we can actually phase our legal review and not wait until the very end to have, to get legal review and, with questionable turnaround time. We could do
Right.
it in sections and maybe make it a little more efficient.
I think we're doing very well as far as the schedule.
It's ambitious, but
Yeah.
we're working on it.
All right. Do you want to continue with your fiscal year 2021 budget recommendations?
So I'm taking a different tack this evening. So I do not have recommendations on budget lines tonight. I want to try to focus on revenue projections. So you have in front of you what I would call, I guess, the budget summary sheet or the revenue summary sheet. That's page 1. That's with the orange highlights. Okay. In prior years, the Finance Committee has structured this sheet to show the gross total income at the top of the sheet. And at the bottom, they've run the maximum budget calculations, which includes the maximum tax levy calculated based on the prior fiscal year, plus the 2.5% growth, plus 2.5% increase, plus the new growth. They've also added the debt exclusion amounts at the bottom of the sheet. And then they have reduced the bottom of the sheet by the obligations that are required to be paid by the town right off the top. So we receive every year from the state, for example, we receive cherry sheets, and we get cherry sheet numbers. So we see state receipts and we see state charges. The state charges are not something that towns, that I've ever typically budgeted. We take those charges right off the top. So when we see the state receipts, we deduct the state charges from that, and then we have net income, that we calculate net income after that. So my suggestion, and I'm presenting this to FinCom too. I've had just an initial discussion with FinCom. I think that it would be transparent, and it would help us calculate revenue projections more consistently in future years if we take those obligations right from the subtotal of income that we receive from all revenue sources. So obligations are state cherry sheet charges, and those are things for like mosquito control, certain regional assessments and things like that. It's also, an obligation would also be state aid to public libraries. That is an offset that has to be calculated as a revenue and then immediately deducted because it can't be included in general revenues because it can't fund the general operating budget. It can only fund library outside of the library's budget appropriation. So that's another obligation. And the third obligation is the allowance for abatements and exemptions that has to be taken off of our estimated revenues to provide for any abatements and exemptions that are requested and granted in that coming fiscal year. So when we total those amounts for FY '21, the initial projection that we have right now is $245,750. My recommendation is to take that off the subtotal income of the sum of local property taxes, new growth, state aid, receipts, local receipts, offset receipts, and reserve receipts. And you take those obligations off, and there's your total net income. And that's the amount that I would say should match your budget amount to balance the budget. So that's, it's kind of a structural thing, but my recommendation is that we do it this way. It's transparent. It's going to help us plan for future years' projections to assure that we've captured the obligations and the income. Okay? So that's the first piece. The second piece, does anybody have any questions on that? Okay. The second piece is related to kind of long-range strategic financial planning. The Capital Planning Committee came before the board and made recommendations on capital projects. Was it last meeting? Last meeting. Seems like so long ago.
I know.
But it was last meeting. And one of their recommendations was to establish a capital stabilization fund that would be used as a savings mechanism to be able to plan for large capital expenses over a period of time, rather than receiving free cash in 1 year and spending it out, or public safety mitigations monies and spending them out right then, to actually set aside some monies that could be appropriated in the future for large capital expenditures, or in the case of public safety mitigation, public safety expenditures. So I'm introducing these guidelines on, first, use of free cash, and second, use of public safety mitigation funds to provide some programmatic funding to the operating budget, to the capital budget, to capital stabilization, possibly to a future OPEB trust fund, which is for post-retirement health insurance benefits, to the general stabilization fund, and to leave, in the case of free cash, to leave a base in the free cash amount to serve as the base for next year's certified free cash. And that helps prevent, major spikes or major fluctuations in certified free cash from year to year. So this would entail, and it's going to be my recommendation, that the town establish a capital stabilization fund this year with the seed funding recommended by the Capital Planning Committee. We also have a small remaining balance in the Highland Commons Capital Fund. There's a small $4,000-something balance that I would also recommend putting into that. Not only is having a savings mechanism in the form of a special stabilization fund a good financial practice, but in order to draw money from stabilization, as you know, it requires a 2/3 vote. So if we want to fund a capital item in future years from this special stabilization fund, it's going to require a firm vote by town meeting, a 2/3 vote of town meeting, to draw the money from that fund to be able to fund that capital purchase or the capital project. So I think it's a best practice, or it's financially sound practice to start looking at monies that we received in a way that we can actually apportion some of those funds to various things in a sustainable way. So I wanted to go over that with the board. I feel like I'm bringing some blank stares.
No.
How do you feel about that? How do you feel, initially?
I think it's great. I think that finance and some of the other departments have been asking for it for a long time, so I think it's great.
Okay. I want to be sure that I'm not traveling down a path that's...
I don't have much but blank stares tonight.
And just as importantly, I would ask for the same with the use of public safety mitigation funds. So the town has historically received the public safety mitigation monies and spent them on a combination of capital projects and at times recurring operating costs. Establishing these guidelines would actually be able to allocate the funds to different purposes, including saving for future public safety items. An ambulance replacement, for example, is not cheap. So, to try to fund an ambulance replacement in 1 year without borrowing for it and without having saved for it would be extremely difficult. You'd end up having no money to apply anywhere else. This way it would at least allow you to allocate funds to different...
When we did buy the ambulance, we did use the offset receipts.
You used the offset, so you somehow
2
saved...
years.
Yes.
Okay, so you somehow saved the offset receipts or
Yes, and we
purchased
put
it
off
over.
the purchase of the, that
We did it
vehicle.
over 2 years. so
I
that
see.
it would be-
We
I
put it
see,
off so
okay.
that
Yeah,
we could pay for it in the second year.
okay, yeah, and that's financially
Yeah,
sound
but-
practice too.
That doesn't work with a fire truck.
Well, yeah, with a fire truck, that's another thing. So I think, to start saving and to save, for certain replacement costs, like for ambulance and fire trucks. But not only that, we have the River Bridge Agreement, where the financial obligations are going to be kicking in soon. Those financial obligations are only going to run for 5 years, and it's $100,000 a year for 5 years, and then it ends. So the question is, what does the town do with the $100,000 a year for 5 years, and then it ends? This would provide a mechanism to put that money away and really plan for its use. So that, I wanted to introduce that. I am going to be talking with both Chief Clark and Chief Galvin about this because I want their feedback. One of the proposals with this public safety mitigation funding is to put a portion of it into specific recurring operating costs, particularly personnel costs, where personnel has been added. My proposal would be to fund those additional positions year on year from this particular funding source rather than from the tax levy. So
So I do have a question.
Okay.
On one page, you have,
Where
it looks like this,
Okay,
source
yeah.
of funds.
Yeah.
In the yellow, you
Yeah.
have reserve receipt 235,601.
Where are
So come up like a quarter of the way from the bottom.
235,601, yes.
Okay.
That would represent the ladder truck payoff.
Okay, flip a couple pages.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of looks the same.
Yeah?
Number's different.
Yes.
119, 912. So where is the
The rest of it.
$100,000 difference?
So that second page that you pulled up that has 119,912, that represents a 1-year pay down of the ladder truck as opposed to the full payoff of the ladder truck. The ladder truck has been funded from the tax levy, and the idea of using the Highland Commons Public Safety mitigation funds to pay off the ladder truck means that it would be pulled off of the tax levy and funded from the mitigation fund. So I've got two scenarios here. One is the full payoff, the other is a 1-year pay down.
So full payoff, 235?
Yes,
1-year payoff, 119?
that's correct. It gives two options.
Okay.
And similarly for these two,
Yep,
one is,
yes,
the change is 1.7%, the other is 2.5%.
right. That's because of the application you'll see in the reserve receipts column. You'll see either for the full payoff, you see the 335,601.
Okay.
And for the 1-year pay down, it's 219,912. So that impacts the net income.
Okay. At first I thought I got doubles of everything, and then I realized.
Sorry, I should have them labeled. You know what? I will. The finance committee hasn't decided yet whether they want to do a pay down or pay off. Either way, I thought it was important to actually, take the funding off of the tax levy so that tax levy could be applied to other recurring costs. So
Okay.
Okay, last question.
Yeah.
Front
I hope I'm
sheet,
ready.
looks like this.
Yes.
Okay. Here you have FY '21, 14,217 and change.
Yes.
And,
10,000.
right, so that's your total income.
Right.
And then you scoot all the way down to maximum allowed FY '19 budget, 15 million and change. So, and then the column beside it has for FY '20, 14 million and
Yeah.
change. Are you saying that we're a million over?
No, you're actually funding you're funding the budget about $1 million under what you could actually be funding the budget at. That's because you are not, and I think this was responsible of the Finance Committee to look at it this way. The Finance Committee has, I think, intentionally avoided taxing at the full debt exclusion amount. So you have not, you could actually be taxing at the levy and adding almost $1 million in that debt exclusion amount, and you've stayed away from doing that. So that is a good thing. I don't know if you remember the charts that we brought a few weeks ago. It did show that there is a little creep in there, that we're kind of creeping into that, but you're definitely nowhere near taxing to the full amount that you could be taxing.
Okay.
All right. Are we moving on, Margaret?
Quick, move on before I come up with other questions.
Moving on.
All right. The custodian job description.
Yes, so a few updates to the draft. I received, the Personnel Committee took this up at their last meeting last week. They added a couple of proposed edits in the first paragraph, or one. They added the word flexibility. And then I went ahead, I did receive a few other comments. The first resulted, I'm going to have to bring this back to the Personnel Committee to look this over, but the first resulted in the addition of a sentence on page 2, shown and underlined, that reads, "The Highway and Facility Superintendent shall notify the custodian of any closures or delayed openings of the municipal offices and the other buildings due to winter storms, and shall assign the snow and ice removal work to ensure that all exterior areas are cleared prior to each building's next scheduled business opening." So this kind of ties into the winter weather closure policy. I did consistent capitals or lowercase throughout, and changed wills to shalls. And I added, there was a comment on adding interior repairs and maintenance if needed, so I did add that near the top of page 2. Other than that, it's, I think that's it. So other than that, it's exactly as the board reviewed it at your last meeting.
All right. Questions, comments?
So are we approving this tonight, or are we waiting until personnel looks at it again?
You could approve it tonight. I could bring it to personnel if they have any questions. We can always do amendments later, but I think these are pretty basic updates. Yeah,
Okay.
most of them are just strictly editorial.
Motion to approve.
Seconded.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. We have the annual town report approvals. The selectmen, I have, you sent me your?
Yeah.
Yes, you sent me something. Margaret sent me something. I haven't had a chance to put it together. Do you want me to just defer it till next meeting?
Yes.
Is there anything that you want to, like, comment on, or?
Well, I gave you
Yes.
my thing, so.
Okay.
And the same, I mean, I had some basic ones. I mean, I like how you mentioned the names of whether they're the personnel committee or how other people have played into town. To me, that just shows people are getting involved.
Community involvement.
Yeah, I mean, it's community involvement. You may say, hey, you know what, I really like Sue on the personnel committee, so maybe I'll join too, or, no, but I'm just saying, it just gives ownership to more and more events, so personally, I liked the names being put
See,
in there.
I'm very uncomfortable with that because we have a lot of volunteers who do a lot of work, and to mention just one or two, I think is inappropriate. Unless you're gonna mention everybody that we approved and everybody who's put in work, then singling people out, I just don't agree with that.
Okay.
I mean, I don't see it as singling people out. And, you know, and maybe there's a paragraph that you could put in here like they always do when someone accepts an award. I know that there's many people that I've forgotten to mention, you know, and thank you for all your help. We possibly can't list everything. I don't know. I like recognition. I'd like to thank people for all that they have done, so.
I know one of the things that you had asked me to change was to change it to a select board. I know it was, what if I were to put a paragraph in about how we did approve it, but we're just waiting for approval?
Yeah, and my supposition was, we're supposed to have approval by the 5th, correct? Is
Fifth
that-
of-
They seem to be-
February. We are
Really?
supposed to
They
have.
they seem to be on it now. I'm not holding my breath, but
Yeah.
I'm hopeful.
Well, I mean, but we're talking about 2019, and it wasn't approved in 2019.
Yeah, but our town meeting did indeed approve it.
Yes,
it-
and that's why I
the
thought
language
maybe
is
I should
incons-
just mention that. And that this will be the last year, that this will be
Yeah.
the selectmen's annual report. Or something to that effect.
Excited.
Yeah, but if I went to town meeting and I had voted for that last year and saw that, I'd go, what the heck?
Well, I would too, if I wasn't involved in town government, because I wouldn't have known that you had to wait for the AG
I
to...
literally just got a Facebook hit asking about the name change.
Are they watching our meeting? No.
No, but I posted about Ken Clark, and they want to know why are you still being referred to as the Board of Selectmen?
Yeah,
Huh.
because we're
So
not.
how about if I explain that?
It's significant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I was thinking about as I was reading some of the comments. Is there anything else?
So a question on where am I? First page, building inspector versus building commissioner. I know that the former building inspector / commissioner had on his license commissioner, but
What was he
official-
actually appointed as? That was my
Inspector.
question.
Building
That's
inspector.
fine, but Richard definitely was commissioner. We appointed him as commissioner.
Yes.
So either way.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. No other, it was just like, you know, oh, and then, on kind of towards your bottom with the assistance from Representative Naughton and State Senator Dean Tran, either add Harold or drop
Yeah.
Dean.
And
Just make it.
I had the same feedback.
Sorry.
I could elaborate on both, or
It's
But that's
Harold Naughton, and it's Representative Naughton.
Rep Naughton, and just put
And
Representative
Senator
Naughton and
Tran.
Senator Tran.
Yeah,
All
I
right.
will.
Okay, that's all I had.
All
I
right.
have 'em.
Alrighty, so now we're on to the draft weather closure policy.
we didn't say anything about town administrators? Is mine?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yours looked great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
There
thought
were
yours
no
looked great.
comments.
You want to make a motion to approve?
Motion
Yep,
to approve.
seconded.
Why, thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
This
Very
is
good.
my
First. I think you know, I think we need to put it in a frame and put it up, and you need to sign the bottom of it.
Here
Oh,
you go.
I thought it was
There you
very
go.
good.
Thank you.
I
Very
did too.
What
good.
is it?
Her
My
annual
first
town
annual
report.
report.
Her first annual town report that will go into the,
Oh, your submission.
It's the town's, first town administrators, first ever.
I would like an
Yes.
autographed copy when we get the town
Okay.
reports. Okay, just saying. All right.
all right. We're
eBay.
getting a little crazy here.
All right.
Okay, the draft
Well,
weather closure policy.
I didn't think that I'd have this many recommended changes, but I did provide, this is new business, so it's just for the board's review this week, but I did, there is a red line that you have that does include several different recommended additions and edits. So I ask that you please look that over and let me know by Wednesday if possible, or by Thursday, what you think.
Did you have a chance to look at it?
I didn't see that one today. That one
The
was-
red line,
was that
I
in the
think there
folder?
was there a
think I
red line
put-
and then there was a,
I did. I put a red
Cleaned up
line.
one?
I did. I put a red line and a clean one.
Maybe I didn't.
how about you?
I didn't read it.
It's essentially, and I've added
Everything.
He wanted honesty.
It's in a folder called weather closure policy.
a subfolder. Oh, okay.
I
Okay.
wonder if it went later.
So yeah, please look that over and let me know
right.
if you have any recommended edits. Oh, I'm sorry, and you don't have these in front of you, I don't think. I apologize.
What's that?
That is, and here, Lisa, here is a,
Oh,
no, it's paper. There's the NPEG.
Thank you, Margaret.
It's,
see, this is what the picture would look like in the book, or in the,
I liked it. It was work well done and to be recognized, but,
yeah.
and to call out who's who in the photo.
All right.
so the weather closure policy will be back for board approval next week.
Okay. Eating my sweater, I think. All right, board questions and comments.
Telling you, can you just please rename it the Peg Answer Question?
I meant to bring my booklet.
Okay. All right, well, I just have a couple. So this, Mr. B, if you can zoom in on it. So, the town is sponsoring a pajama drive from Saturday, February 1st through Saturday, March 14th. All sorts of sizes of pajamas from kids all the way up to teens. They will be distributed locally. So if you have any, you can bring them on down to the library. That would be awesome. And I will post this out in the center so people can look at it.
Would you be modeling pajamas for it?
Absolutely not. But thank you for the opportunity. Second one is, so give a plug for Assabet After Dark. I feel like Vanna.
Yes.
There was a course in here that I had reached out to Margaret. It was about grant writing, and I'm pretty sure that it's probably introductory level. It's for one night, and I know, Margaret writes grant, Lisa has written some. Didn't know if it was an opportunity for others of us in the town to look into this course, to see what's out there. The more of us that know how to write grants or get the opportunity out there to ask for free money, I see nothing that anyone can argue with me on that. So wanted to bring it up to you to see whom you might think else might be applicable to take this. It's one night, Thursday, March 26th from 6:30 to 9:30 over at Assabet, just right down the road in Marlboro. So,
Yeah, I would say, there was a day when grants were wants. They are no longer wants, they are needs, especially
Yeah.
for small towns.
okay. And it did say, come with an organization or project in mind that needs funding. So I'm sure between now, I know, really. Between now and mid-March, I'm sure that whoever might be tapped could come with opportunity in mind for that. And speaking of Assabet, have you had a chance to follow up with them on the signage?
I did, and I just did today. I have to
Okay.
apologize,
No
but
worries.
I did send it to the principal and the head of the sign department.
Okay.
So, we actually saw
Yeah.
some really
On that topic, when we were over in West Boylston, there were very nicely done signs, and I did ask who did them, and it is a local company that is in West Boylston. They gave me their name. I did call them. They would be happy to come out and give us a quote. Asked all the right questions up front because this is something that they do and have
Yep.
done for a town already. So if you are amenable, I will arrange for them to come out and give us a quote.
Absolutely.
But they did, I don't know how many details were given to Assabet, but they wanted several details about what we would be looking
Yeah.
for specifically because they know the questions to ask, I suspect, in a way that Assabet may not have.
Yeah. Yeah, they
Okay.
had very large, West Boylston had very large signs with the braille, with
Nice.
really
They-
clear
they were
office titles.
Really well done. And the rules on ADA signs are very extensive.
Nice.
So I would feel more comfortable if we had somebody who knew
Okay.
that process doing it.
So down the hallway and then down front as well, maybe?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
we can look at that. Meanwhile, I'll wait for, I'll
Yeah,
wait to
and
hear
they
back.
actually had
What are your
asked, they
options?
asked whether we wanted a directory, they asked what we were thinking for colors,
Nice.
they asked, the first
Option.
question out of his mouth was ADA accessible, and like, absolutely. So I had a very good comfort level with
Good.
the
Nope.
responses that I was getting.
Absolutely.
Okay, so
Perfect,
I will
thank you.
give them a call.
Appreciate that. And the Peggy answering question session is done.
Alrighty. So, do we want to do this executive session?
Did we do an executive session, or did we?
It's just
Minutes.
the minutes.
Can we not
so
do
the-
the executive session?
Huh?
Can I please go home?
Can we do this executive
Just-
session minutes next time? The 27th and then whatever tonight's?
Yes, we can, yes.
That'd be good. All right. Then I would look for a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thanks, Mr. B.